In the heart of America's industrial Midwest, where factories hum and communities thrive on the rhythm of production, a policy decision from Washington has sent shockwaves through the economy. Over 100,000 American workers have lost their jobs, not to automation, globalization, or foreign competition, but to a single stroke of a pen. On June 4, 2025, former President Donald Trump, back in the White House, signed an executive order imposing a 50% tariff on aluminum imports, doubling the existing 25% duty. Hailed as a shield for American industry, this tariff was meant to revive domestic production and protect jobs. Instead, it has become a wrecking ball, shattering supply chains, spiking costs, and leaving workers from Michigan to Texas grappling with an uncertain future. This isn't just a policy misstep, it's a seismic disruption that raises a critical question. Can protectionism truly safeguard American workers, or is it a self-inflicted wound tearing at the fabric of the nation's economy? The story begins in early March 2025 when the Trump administration made a calculated move to remove Canada's exemption from aluminum and steel tariffs under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. This section, a relic of the 1960s, allows the president to impose trade restrictions for national security reasons. Initially set at 25%, the tariff was a bold signal of intent, but just 3 months later, Trump escalated the stakes. On June 4, he shocked global markets by doubling the tariff to 50%, effective immediately. In a post on his Truth Social platform, he declared in all caps, "I will never let American jobs be sold out to foreign interests." The move was framed as a defense of American smelters, a bid to restore the nation's industrial might, and a promise to bring jobs back to the Rust Belt. To his base, it was a rallying cry, a defiant stand against foreign producers accused of undercutting American workers. But beneath the rhetoric, a far more complex reality was unfolding. This wasn't Trump's first foray into tariff wars. In 2018, he had invoked the same Section 232 mechanism to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum, citing national security. The results were a mixed bag. Some smelters reopened, but others shuttered as rising input costs squeezed downstream industries. The 2025 tariffs, however, were far more aggressive, landing in an economy already strained by inflation and fragile supply chains. Unlike the earlier tariffs, which had expiration dates and room for negotiation, the new order was indefinite, casting a shadow of uncertainty over industries reliant on aluminum. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, in a carefully worded statement, acknowledged the goal of boosting domestic production but warned of the risks to downstream industries, think auto manufacturers, home builders, and beverage companies, that depend on affordable aluminum. Her caution was echoed by lawmakers across party lines, from Senate Finance Chair Ron Wyden to GOP Senator J.D. Vance, a Trump ally who admitted in a closed-door briefing that the policy risks strangling the very supply chains it aimed to protect. The political calculus behind the tariff was clear. Trump's team saw it as phase 2 of an economic revival plan, a populist gambit to reclaim Rust Belt states like Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. These regions, battered by decades of industrial decline, were fertile ground for a message of economic nationalism. The 50% tariff wasn't just a policy, it was a performance, a bold stroke designed to dominate headlines and rally voters. But while it played well to the cameras, it ignored the quiet warnings from industry leaders. The Aluminum Association, representing both producers and users, issued a stark response within hours of the announcement. While it supported efforts to strengthen domestic smelting, it cautioned that the majority of U.S. aluminum jobs lie in midstream and downstream sectors, fabrication, transportation, and assembly, where higher input costs could be catastrophic. Their estimate was chilling. For every smelting job saved, up to 16 jobs in related industries could be lost. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within weeks, industry reports painted a grim picture. Alcoa, one of the nation's largest aluminum producers, warned that the tariff could jeopardize 20,000 direct smelting jobs and 80,000 indirect jobs in related sectors, totaling a staggering 100,000 positions at risk. These weren't abstract numbers, they were the paychecks of neighbors, the stability of small towns, the economic lifeblood of communities. The ripple effects spread far beyond smelters. Home builders faced soaring costs for aluminum siding, auto suppliers grappled with pricier components, and even the American Beverage Association warned that the cost of aluminum cans could spike, driving up prices for everyday staples like beer, soda, and canned foods. On Wall Street, the reaction was equally telling. Shares of aluminum-dependent companies like Ford, General Motors, Boeing, and Ball Corporation dropped 2 to 5% in the hours after Trump's announcement. Bank of America analysts called it a short-term gain, long-term cost bomb, a policy that might boost smelters temporarily but would cripple industries reliant on affordable metal. The root of the problem lies in the economics of aluminum production. Smelting is an energy-intensive process requiring roughly 14,821 kilowatt-hours per ton of aluminum. In the U.S., industrial electricity prices averaged 8.21 cents per kilowatt-hour in April 2025, up from 7.79 cents the previous year. Across the border in Quebec, hydroelectric suppliers offered rates as low as 2.48 to 3.94 cents per kilowatt-hour, locked in for decades through long-term contracts. This gave Canadian producers a massive cost advantage, making their aluminum cheaper even after a 50% tariff. In the U.S., volatile short-term energy contracts and rising regional rates, some climbing above 10 cents per kilowatt-hour, made domestic smelting economically irrational. Alcoa's CEO, Bill Oplinger, put it bluntly to investors, "You can't fire up a smelter on mere promises, you need cheap, stable power." Without it, U.S. producers were left scrambling, unable to compete with Canada's energy edge. The tariffs' impact wasn't limited to smelters. Downstream manufacturers faced a 12% jump in aluminum premiums, with Midwest prices hitting 24 cents per pound. Factories producing everything from car parts to aluminum cans had two choices: absorb the cost or cut jobs. Layoffs spiked across the Rust Belt, with entire shifts vanishing in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. By April and May 2025, economists noted a measurable dip in manufacturing employment directly tied to the tariffs rollout. The pain didn't stop at factory gates. Local tax revenues plummeted, consumer spending dried up, and small-town services, schools, shops, hospitals, began to feel the squeeze. A factory shutdown doesn't just kill jobs, it unravels the ecosystem that sustains communities. Energy markets, too, felt the strain. As heavy users scaled back, industrial electricity demand dipped, leaving fixed grid costs spread over fewer kilowatt-hours. This drove per-unit rates higher, creating a vicious cycle. Higher tariffs led to less output, which led to higher energy costs, which further eroded competitiveness. In Canada, the blowback was just as real. Union leaders reported layoffs as U.S. tariffs disrupted cross-border supply chains. Canadian producers, leveraging their cheap hydroelectric power, continued to undercut U.S. smelters, even with the tariff in place. The policy meant to protect American jobs was instead pushing allies away and raising costs for everyone. Globally, the tariff reopened old wounds. Canada, the EU, and South Korea, blindsided by the escalation, whispered of World Trade Organization complaints and retaliatory measures. On March 5th, Canada lodged a formal WTO complaint, DS 635, signaling a legal fight to protect its interests. Prime Minister Mark Carney, newly sworn in, warned that Canada would retaliate, targeting U.S. exports like metals, cars, and spirits. He also announced a $1 billion investment fund to bolster Canada's aluminum and steel industries, a move to cushion the blow of U.S. tariffs. Meanwhile, Canadian exporters pivoted, redirecting shipments to Europe, Asia, and Mexico. Data showed Canada's export share to the U.S. dropped from 78% to 68%, between May 2024 and May 2025. A seismic shift in trade strategy. Other global players weighed in. Australia's Trade Minister, Don Farrell, called the tariffs economically harmful and hinted at WTO action. The EU paused its response but kept retaliatory measures on the table. Japan and South Korea, still smarting from 2018's trade wars, quietly lobbied Washington to reconsider. The global aluminum market shifted in response, with shipments from the United Arab Emirates surging to 68,560 metric tons in March 2025, up from 16,124 the previous year. U.S. buyers, desperate for supply, turned to third-party imports, undermining the very protectionism the tariff was meant to enforce. Back home, the tariff's failure to deliver became painfully clear. Planned smelters in Minnesota and Texas remained on hold, even as global demand for low-carbon aluminum grew. Downstream industries from aerospace to construction announced cutbacks and furloughs. The policy's promise of job creation was drowned out by the reality of layoffs and economic disruption. Trump, unbowed, doubled down in interviews telling Newsmax, "If they're screaming, that means we're doing something right." To his base, it was a sign of strength. To policy experts, it was a rerun of a familiar playbook, one with higher stakes and a bigger budget. The deeper issue is structural. U.S. aluminum production is hamstrung by energy costs and aging infrastructure. Canada's long-term hydroelectric contracts, locking in rates at 2 to 4 cents per kilowatt-hour, are a model of stability that U.S. producers can't match. Most U.S. energy contracts are short-term and volatile, with rates climbing as grids strain under rising demand. Building new smelters or modernizing old ones requires billions in investment and decades of predictable pricing, neither of which the U.S. can currently offer. The tariff, meant to level the playing field, instead exposed these weaknesses, driving up costs and pushing jobs overseas. So where does America go from here? Some economists suggest cutting the tariff to 20% to ease the burden on downstream industries. Others propose tax breaks for recycled or low-carbon aluminum, a growing market with untapped potential. But the bigger question is whether protectionism can ever deliver the jobs it promises. Tariffs may shield specific industries, but they often come at the expense of broader economic health. Real change requires investment in energy, infrastructure, and innovation. Imagine a U.S. where smelters run on affordable, renewable power, where supply chains are resilient, and where workers aren't caught in the crossfire of political posturing. That's not a pipe dream. It's a blueprint for a stronger economy. For now, the 50% aluminum tariff stands as a cautionary tale. It's a reminder that policies born of populism can backfire, leaving workers and communities to bear the cost. From the factory floors of Ohio to the small towns of Pennsylvania, the impact is real. Mortgages unpaid, savings drained, futures uncertain. The debate over trade is far from over. But one thing is clear. America's path forward lies not in raising walls but in building smarter, more sustainable systems. What do you think? Can the U.S. find a balance between protection and progress, or are we doomed to repeat the same mistakes? Share your thoughts and let's keep the conversation going.